Some believe that when a place sees enough death, it doesn't just carry a memory, it absorbs it. The very ground, the walls, and the air itself can become heavy with the energy of what happened there. In the case of the Winston Tunnel, that belief feels chillingly possible. Since its construction began in 1887, this abandoned train tunnel, located just 8 miles south of Galena, has been the site of multiple fatalities. From the earliest days, workers faced brutal hazardous conditions and the perils of cave-ins, rattlesnakes, and typhoid fever, along with the constant risk of deadly accidents. The half-mile-long tunnel, carved through shale stone in the remote bluffs of Joe Daviess County, quickly became known as a dangerous and unforgiving place. The secluded tunnel also carried a reputation for being more than just dangerous. It was said to be haunted. As far back as the early 1900s, rumors began to spread among railway workers that the Winston Tunnel was haunted by the people who tragically died during its construction. Section workers claimed they heard voices and unexplained sounds echoing through the darkness when no one else was inside the tunnel. These voices and sounds were also witnessed by operators of the fan house, an old building that once stood outside the opening of the tunnel and was used for ventilation purposes. It was even said that the fan house operator was the least desirable job on the railroad because of its roadless location in the middle of nowhere and scary stories about the ghost that haunts the tunnel. Some say the spirit of a Finnish construction worker named John Hill still haunts the tunnel after dying in a terrible accident here in 1887, just 10 days after the digging began. John Hill was fatally struck in the back of the head by a loaded dump car after its brake system failed, and the man was thrown to the ground where he died soon after. After John Hill's tragic death, rumors spread among railway workers about strange sounds heard from deep within the tunnel and the ghost of a man that was seen lurking on the tracks inside. And these weren't just tall tales told around campfires. Some workers were genuinely afraid of the tunnel, especially the operator of the fan house who worked alone at the entrance overnight. Most of the ghost stories revolve around the death of John Hill, the first railway worker on record to die inside this historic tunnel, and unfortunately, he wasn't the last. After looking through dozens of newspaper archives, I found numerous articles from 1887 to 1963 documenting multiple deaths inside Winston Tunnel, which in the early days was known as the Rice Tunnel or the Northwestern Tunnel. The tunnel's construction began in 1887, and from the very start, the work was treacherous. A crew of around 350 men dug through layers of shale stone, a brittle and unstable rock that could shift or collapse without warning. Most of the digging was done by hand, using primitive tools like pickaxes and shovels, but dynamite was also used, and this took the lives of at least 2 workers. In 1887, during a dynamite blast, 22-year-old Edward Hines was standing outside the opening of the tunnel and was struck in the back by an airborne shale fragment. The man died from his injuries hours later. Then in the weeks that followed, a German immigrant was killed from a premature dynamite explosion when falling rocks fell from the tunnel ceiling, instantly crushing the man to death before he had a chance to escape. Tragedy struck again in 1892 when 2 freight trains collided inside the tunnel at a high rate of speed, taking the life of 1 man on board the train and 2 firemen who tried to extinguish the fire. Death also came to workers in the form of typhoid fever and other deadly diseases that quickly spread through nearby work camps, infecting dozens of men. And before the tunnel's ventilation system existed, some railway workers met their fate after passing out from toxic fumes and getting run over and mangled by passing trains. This happened to railway workers and also people hitching rides on trains, not knowing the toxic smoke from the steam engine would overtake them inside the tunnel. The final death on record was in 1963 when a 38-year-old woman was found dead inside the tunnel after attempting to walk from one end to the other and getting hit by a train. 9 years later, in 1972, the tunnel and the train tracks officially closed after decades of costly maintenance work and the construction of new train lines. With the high number of deaths that have occurred inside this creepy train tunnel, it's no surprise it has a reputation for being haunted. Some of the more recent stories associated with this location include growling sounds that have been heard from inside the tunnel and sightings of a floating mist near the entrance. In another story that dates back to when the tracks were still in operation, a man on horseback set up a campsite in the woods nearby when the horse suddenly became frightened and bolted into the tunnel for reasons unknown. Railway workers were alerted, and a group of men entered the tunnel from both sides to find the horse and remove it, But after walking from one opening to the other, the men realized the horse had completely vanished and it was never seen again. There are also stories about hunters chasing deer and other animals into the dark mouth of the tunnel, only for the animals to vanish without a trace. And because of these stories, some believe the Winston Tunnel isn't just abandoned. It may be a vortex or time slip, swallowing anything that dares to enter. After spending an afternoon here, I found the woods around the tunnel to be a peaceful place, but it does give you an ever-present sense that something just isn't right. The inside of the tunnel is muddy and flooded from spring water, so I didn't wander in too far, but enough to get some better footage, and it is by far one of the creepiest places I've ever explored on my channel. I also noticed something strange in one of my video clips after reviewing the footage. In this clip, as I pan down from the top of the tunnel, a loud bang can be heard. What's really weird is that we did not hear this sound while filming the tunnel, but it's quite loud in the video clip. It sounds like a possible gunshot or maybe a loud splash coming from inside the tunnel, but I'm not sure. The forest around the Winston Tunnel is also quite eerie, and scattered throughout the trees and the trail itself are pieces of history slowly being reclaimed by nature but still visible. Along the trail and former train tracks that lead to the haunted tunnel, you can still see some of the original railroad ties poking through the grass in a few places. And if you follow the overgrown tracks to the end of a bluff, you can see a relic from a train bridge. Deep within the forest, at the top of a steep bluff that we climbed up on our way in, we found an animal den in the crumbling base of an old trestle bridge. And further into the woods, in a jungle of nettle and thorn bushes, we found 2 stone walls from a long-lost 1800s house still standing. These stone walls are all that remain of a house once owned by the Pedagos, a family of French immigrants who settled here in the 1800s. For generations, the Pedagos farmed this land near the Winston Tunnel, but no one knows exactly why the home was abandoned. There are no records of a fire or a tragedy, at least that I could find, but at some point the family left the property behind and the forest took over. After all of the time that has passed, these old stone walls remain, standing through harsh winters and overgrown summers, long after everything else has faded. Though there are no ghost stories tied to the crumbling walls of the Pedagos house, their presence in the woods feels strangely in line with the atmosphere surrounding the tunnel. Much like the tunnel itself, the area feels frozen in time, steeped in silence and the slow decay of what once was. But let me know if you have ever visited the Winston Tunnel or the ruins of the old house in the woods nearby. Have you ever gone inside the tunnel, and if so, did you hear voices or growling sounds or see a floating mist at the entrance as the legends claim? Leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your story. In the small town of Chesterville, a largely Amish region that no longer appears on modern maps, is an old cemetery with an eerie legend about a mysterious grave and a disturbing story. In the back of the cemetery, not far from the riverbank, is a massive oak tree and an old wrought iron fence that was placed around the burial site many years ago. It's at the base of this ancient oak tree where the infamous Chesterville Witch is said to be buried. A small headstone leaning against the tree is marked with the initials AH. But other than that small detail, the grave bears no name and no dates, adding to the unsettling mystery that surrounds it. According to legend, the woman buried beneath the tree was once part of the local community, but something about her drew negative attention. Some say she was a healer, knowledgeable in herbs and remedies, and even possessed supernatural powers. Others claim she was an outspoken woman who challenged the strict religious doctrines of the time, something that would have made her a target in such a conservative setting. She questioned church leaders, rejected the expectations placed on women, and openly criticized what she saw as hypocrisy. Her rebellious behavior ultimately went too far in the eyes of the townspeople, and the community branded her a witch. Whether through shunning or something more sinister, the woman disappeared one day and was later found dead in a farmer's field, according to one version of the legend. A second version of the story suggests she died suddenly in her home under mysterious circumstances, with rumors of foul play persisting. Other versions depict her as an elderly woman who confessed to witchcraft or as a healer accused of poisoning a community member. But in all retellings of this grim story, the woman dies under mysterious circumstances and is buried in Chesterville Cemetery. After she died, the woman's lifeless body was taken to a nearby funeral home where it was made available for public viewing. Soon after, Amish folks traveled from surrounding areas, drawn by whispered rumors and morbid curiosities. Many arrived with unease, gripped by the fear that the woman, rumored to be an evil witch, might somehow return from the dead. This morbid fear was so strong that the funeral home staff even kept a close eye on the body until it was laid to rest in the cemetery. After the poor woman was buried in Chesterville Cemetery, a tree was deliberately planted over her grave, an old superstition meant to bind the spirit within the tree's roots. That same tree is the one that stands at the gravesite today, and local folklore warns that if the tree is ever cut down or the fence removed, the woman's spirit will be released to seek revenge on the townspeople. If you look closely at the bark, you can see marks where someone actually tried killing the tree to free the woman's spirit allegedly trapped within its roots. If you visit this grave, you will often find coins, flowers, and other items left at the gravesite as an offering, further testifying to the enduring fascination with the legend. Over the years, stories have surfaced about supernatural sightings occurring at the gravesite where the tree is believed to imprison the witch's spirit. Stories have been told about the glowing image of a woman's ghost appearing at the gravesite, standing behind the fence at the base of the tree. What's most disturbing to some is that the ghost never appears outside the fence. It's always seen within or directly behind the iron enclosure. This detail has only fueled the belief that the iron fence and the tree itself were placed there not just as a memorial or for symbolism, but as containment. One of the legends surrounding these sightings claims that if you approach the gravesite at exactly midnight and touch the tree behind the gate, the ghost of the witch will appear before you. While the legend of the Chesterville Witch is a fascinating one that continues to draw a lot of attention in the paranormal world, there's plenty of skepticism surrounding the story, and a closer look at the facts reveals that much of it may be more myth than reality. For starters, despite the popular belief that the grave belongs to an Amish woman condemned as a witch, the cemetery itself is not officially Amish. In fact, there is only one Amish person buried on the grounds, according to cemetery records. And traditionally, the Amish do not mark graves with elaborate features, nor do they use ornamental wrought iron fences or plant symbolic trees over burial sites, at least that I'm aware of. The cemetery, though located near Amish communities, is more than likely a burial ground that was used by various settlers in the area over the years. Most of the graves date back to the 1880s. Adding to the doubt is the fact that the witch's grave bears no name other than the initials AH that appear on a small headstone, and there is no burial record confirming who lies beneath the massive tree. Without a name or date, it's impossible to trace any historical figure or verify whether anyone buried there was accused of witchcraft or even who they were at all. I tried finding information about the adult or child buried in this plot using Find a Grave and other resources, but my search was unsuccessful. If you happen to have any information about the person buried in this plot, please leave a comment below. I'd love to know. Despite the skepticism that surrounds the legend of the Chesterville Witch, many still believe the grave is genuinely haunted. Even if the tale of a condemned witch is just a piece of local folklore, the strange energy that surrounds the tree and the grave beneath it feels very real to those who pay a visit. Some argue that the haunting has nothing to do with witchcraft at all, that it could be the restless spirit of whoever is actually buried here, long forgotten and left without a name or a proper headstone. The unsettling atmosphere of the graveyard alone is enough to stir unease, especially at night. Cemetery visitors have reported everything from sudden chills and the overwhelming sense that they are not alone at the gravesite. We didn't experience anything supernatural during our visit to the witch's grave in the daytime, or later that night when we returned with flashlights, but the place is definitely creepy. But let me know what you think about the story of the Chesterville Witch. Do you think this story is true, and have you ever visited this grave at night? Did you see a ghost or experience anything unusual? And if you have any factual information about the person buried in this plot, leave a comment below. There's something undeniably eerie about the idea of a mausoleum being haunted. The cold stone walls, the heavy silence, and the knowledge that inside lie the dead, locked away but never truly gone. This unsettling notion takes on a life of its own at the Massock Mausoleum in the quiet expanse of the Lithuanian Liberty Cemetery in Spring Valley, Illinois. The Massock Mausoleum, now sealed off with concrete, has long been the focus of haunted legends that date back to the 1960s when the crypt was desecrated in a series of disturbing events. Among the many eerie supernatural legends surrounding the cemetery and mausoleum, two stories about this crypt stand out as particularly creepy. One of the most famous legends says that if you knock on the heavy stone walls of the crypt, you'll hear a knock in response, an unmistakable ghostly tapping that seems to come from within. In addition to knocking sounds, visitors have made claims of hearing shuffling sounds and a terrifying moan coming from inside the tomb, even after the city sealed off the window and doors with cement. One story about a frightening moaning sound went public in a 1980s news article and involves a curious reporter who decided to test the power of faith against whatever might be inside the mausoleum. Armed with a small vial of holy water, the reporter approached one of the air vents in the crypt's stone wall and poured it through the narrow opening. According to their account, the reaction was immediate. A low, guttural groan echoed from within the tomb, as if something inside had been disturbed or pained by the water's touch. The sound was said to be faint at first, then rising just enough to send the witness fleeing from the cemetery in terror. Another legend claims that if you slide a stick through the air vent or through cracks in the mausoleum's wall, something will suddenly grab the stick and forcefully pull it into the crypt. Visitors also say that even in the dead of winter, when the cemetery lies under a blanket of snow and the air stings with freezing wind, the wall at the mausoleum's entrance feels strangely warm to the touch. Believers see it as a sign of unnatural energy, perhaps heat radiating from something supernatural, but others say it's nothing more than the stone absorbing heat from the sun. These unsettling stories have convinced many that the restless spirits of the three Massock brothers entombed inside remain trapped within its cold, dark chambers, unable to find peace after vandals desecrated their corpses in the 1960s. Inside this tomb are the partial remains of Jacob, Anton, and Peter Massock, three brothers from Lithuania who once owned a butcher shop and other local businesses in Spring Valley in the early 1900s. In 1965, their eternal resting place was disturbed when two teenagers snuck into the secluded cemetery at night and committed an unspeakable act that became part of its long and unfortunate history of vandalism. The teens pried open the heavy doors of the mausoleum, opened the casket of Anton Massock, who died in 1946, and removed the man's skull, according to a news article from 1966. Then, in a twisted display of utter disrespect, one of the teens attached the skull to the dashboard of his vehicle, parading it through town like a morbid trophy. The macabre stunt didn't go unnoticed for long though, and he was eventually caught and indicted on criminal charges. Anton Massock's skull was returned to the casket, which had been knocked to the floor, and the doors of the tomb were locked once again, but not for long. Between 1966 and 1968, teens broke into the mausoleum at least 3 more times, stealing 2 more skulls and setting one of the caskets on fire, according to newspapers documenting the incident. These heinous acts led to the mausoleum's door and window being permanently sealed off with a thick slab of concrete, preventing anyone from breaking inside again. In the years that followed the desecration in the 1960s, scary stories began circulating about a strange figure rumored to roam the Lithuanian Liberty Cemetery at night. Locals call him the Hatchet Man, a shadowy figure who carries a long-handled axe and watches over the cemetery, attacking anyone who trespasses on the grounds at night. According to one version of the story, the Hatchet Man is the ghost of a former caretaker from the Massock estate who supposedly murdered his wife in a fit of rage and buried the body underneath the house. Another version of the tale claims the Hatchet Man's home is in the decaying ruins of the family's long-abandoned mansion, and he emerges from the dark woods at night to guard the cemetery and ward off intruders. By the 1980s, the Hatchet Man legend began to take on an even darker twist. Stories in Spring Valley claim that the shadowy guardian of the Lithuanian Liberty Cemetery wasn't merely a ghost at all, but a vampire. And allegedly, there was even a sighting of the entity, which has become a major part of the cemetery's legends and lore. One story tells of a pale, gaunt figure that was seen standing near the mausoleum at night, and in one account, a witness supposedly fired a gun at it, but the bullets passed through the creature's body without harm. The question of whether the mausoleum or Lithuanian Liberty Cemetery at large is truly haunted remains open and debated. Over the years, the cemetery has attracted the attention of numerous ghost hunters and paranormal investigators, drawn by its long history of eerie legends and unexplained phenomena. Teams have investigated the grounds with cameras, EVP recorders, and thermal equipment, hoping to capture evidence of the restless spirits said to linger near the infamous mausoleum. Richard Crowe, the famed Chicago ghost hunter, once visited the cemetery and later shared the experience in an interview. According to the story, during an overnight vigil beside the mausoleum, Crowe and his recording crew were so unsettled by an unshakable sense of dread that they abandoned the stakeout long before dawn. Some who have snuck into the cemetery at midnight when the activity is said to peak have described unsettling experiences that could be something beyond mere imagination. In one story I found, a group drove to the cemetery at midnight, and when they turned their vehicle off, they heard a loud moaning sound coming from the mausoleum and quickly drove away in fright. Later that night, one person in the group found unexplained scratch marks on their arm, and the next day, more scratch marks were found on the door of the vehicle where that person's arm had been resting. I also found stories about visitors hearing terrifying screams coming from the cemetery and the woods around it, even during the day when no one else was around. One day, a woman was visiting the grave of a relative in the daytime when a loud scream suddenly bellowed from the woods nearby, and the woman quickly ran to her vehicle in fear. More recently, strange and disturbing events like a burned dog's head left on the mausoleum steps have fueled rumors of occult activity. But let me know if you've ever visited this allegedly haunted cemetery and experienced something you can't explain. Did you hear disembodied moaning or strange sounds coming from inside the mausoleum during your visit? Leave a comment below with your thoughts and stories. But before you go, I put a lot of time and effort into this video, so if you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment. Also, be sure to check out the video you see on the screen and share this video with friends and subscribe to my channel to see more videos like this one.